Ladies and gentlemen, today we journey back to the Viking Age, a time of fierce warriors, legendary conquests, and brutal justice. Among the most feared punishments of this era was the blood eagle, an execution method so gruesome that its mere mention struck terror into the hearts of enemies. The blood eagle was not just a form of capital punishment, it was a spectacle of agony and honor. According to historical accounts, this method was reserved for the worst offenders, traitors, and those who had committed unforgivable crimes against powerful Viking leaders. The execution began with the victim being restrained, their back exposed for the grim process that followed. The Viking Age, spanning roughly from the late 8th century to the early 11th century, was marked by warfare, conquest, and a deep-seated warrior culture. Among the many stories of Viking violence, the blood eagle stands out as one of the most gruesome and terrifying execution methods ever described in historical and literary records. Unlike ordinary executions by hanging, beheading, or burning, the blood eagle was an elaborate and agonizing punishment designed not just to kill, but to send a powerful message to both the victim and onlookers. The blood eagle was said to be performed in full public view, often on a battlefield or in a chieftain's hall, ensuring that the horror was witnessed by many. The very nature of the execution was intended to instill fear and reinforce the Viking ideal of strength and endurance. Those who succumbed to their pain too quickly were seen as weak, while those who endured with minimal screaming were considered truly brave, worthy of being remembered in sagas. It wasn't merely a punishment, it was a demonstration of Viking dominance. Whether used as vengeance against enemies or as a warning to others who might dare to betray their rulers, the blood eagle symbolized the brutal reality of the Viking world, where power was maintained through sheer terror and the merciless enforcement of justice. The blood eagle was not a common execution method used for ordinary criminals or petty offenders. Instead, it was reportedly reserved for those who had committed the gravest betrayals, those who had dishonored a Viking ruler, killed a great warrior, or betrayed their own kin. In Viking society, honor and loyalty were everything. A betrayal was not just a personal offense. It was an attack on one's entire family, clan, or kingdom. Some of the most well-known stories of the blood eagle involve noble or royal figures who had wronged powerful Viking leaders. One of the most famous cases, though still debated by historians, is the execution of King Aella of Northumbria. According to legend, Aella was responsible for the death of the great Viking warrior Ragnar Lothbrok. In retaliation, Ragnar's sons, most notably Ivar the Boneless, allegedly captured Aella and subjected him to the horrific blood eagle as an act of vengeance. This wasn't just an execution, it was a statement. The Vikings believed in avenging their kin, and the blood eagle was the ultimate form of retribution. This execution method also served a psychological purpose. By inflicting such a gruesome and drawn-out death on a high-profile figure, Viking leaders ensured that their enemies feared them. The thought of suffering the blood eagle may have deterred would-be traitors or rebels, reinforcing loyalty among their followers. Even if some of these accounts are exaggerated or mythical, they still reflect the Viking mentality, where betrayal was met with an extreme and unforgettable punishment. The execution process of the blood eagle was as gruesome as it was symbolic. The victim, often a high-ranking enemy or traitor, was captured and restrained, either tied to a post or laid on a flat surface. Unlike swift executions, which aimed to kill quickly, the blood eagle was designed to prolong suffering while showcasing the sheer brutality of Viking justice. The first step involved cutting deep into the victim's back with a sharp blade. The executioner would slice through the layers of skin and muscle, exposing the ribcage beneath. This was an excruciating process, as the victim was usually conscious, enduring every agonizing moment. Some accounts suggest that skilled Viking warriors performed this ritualistic execution with precision, ensuring that the victim remained alive for as long as possible. Once the flesh had been cut away, the most horrifying part of the procedure began, severing the ribs from the spine. The executioner would use axes or other sharp tools to break the ribs one by one, pulling them outward in a gruesome display. This process not only inflicted unbearable pain but also changed the victim's body, giving the appearance of wings spreading from their back. The ribs, now protruding outward, were meant to resemble the outstretched wings of an eagle, a powerful symbol in Viking culture associated with strength, dominance, and even Odin, the god of war and wisdom. The breaking of the ribs was not just a method of execution, it was a deliberate act of humiliation. The victim was essentially flayed open, turned into a grotesque spectacle for those watching. This slow and agonizing process ensured that the execution left a lasting impression, both on the victim and on anyone who dared to challenge the Vikings. After the ribs had been broken and bent outward, the execution reached its most horrifying stage, the removal of the lungs. With the victim still alive, the executioner would carefully reach into the exposed chest cavity and pull the lungs outward through the openings created by the broken ribs. As the lungs expanded and contracted with each labored breath, they would give the eerie illusion of wings flapping, hence the name blood eagle. This final step was not just about inflicting pain. It carried deep symbolic meaning. The eagle was an important creature in Norse mythology, often associated with Odin, the All-Father, who was linked to war, wisdom, and the afterlife. Some scholars suggest that the blood eagle execution was not only a punishment, but also a ritual offering, perhaps a way to send the soul of the condemned directly to Odin's judgment. However, for the victim, this was a fate worse than death. At this stage, the agony would be unbearable. The lungs, now outside the body, would struggle to function properly, causing the victim to suffocate slowly. The combination of extreme blood loss, organ exposure, and the inability to breathe would ultimately lead to death. Some sources claim that victims could remain alive for several minutes in this horrific state, making the blood eagle one of the most prolonged and excruciating execution methods ever recorded. Beyond its physical torment, this method of execution served as a powerful warning to anyone who dared to betray the Vikings. The sight of a person with their ribs splayed open and their lungs flapping like wings would have been a terrifying spectacle, ensuring that the memory of the punishment and the power of those who enforced it would never be forgotten. If the blood eagle was not already excruciating enough, some historical accounts suggest that an additional layer of torture was sometimes inflicted, rubbing salt into the victim's exposed wounds. This practice, though not universally confirmed, would have drastically increased the pain and suffering of the condemned, ensuring that their final moments were as agonizing as possible. Salt, while valuable in ancient times for preserving food, had another well-known effect. It caused intense burning and irritation when applied to open wounds. If this step was indeed part of the blood eagle execution, it would have been a deliberate act of cruelty, designed to prolong suffering and showcase the absolute dominance of the executioner. The Vikings were warriors who believed in strength, endurance, and honor, and some scholars speculate that if a victim could endure the blood eagle without screaming, they might be considered worthy of respect, even in death. However, the pain from salt exposure would have been unbearable. Once the back was flayed open and the ribs broken apart, the raw, exposed flesh and nerve endings would be hypersensitive. The coarse grains of salt would penetrate deep into the muscle and tissue, sending waves of searing agony through the body. Any movement or breath would only worsen the burning sensation, making every passing second more torturous than the last. This detail, if true, further reinforces the idea that the blood eagle was not just an execution but a statement, one meant to strike terror into the hearts of enemies. The Vikings knew that pain was a powerful tool, and by ensuring their most hated foes died in absolute agony, they could send a clear message to anyone who dared challenge them. Whether the practice of rubbing salt into the wounds was historically accurate or an exaggeration of later accounts, it remains one of the most chilling aspects of this already horrifying method of execution. One of the most terrifying aspects of the blood eagle execution was its deliberate attempt to prolong suffering. Unlike quick methods of execution such as beheading or hanging, The blood eagle was designed to keep the victim alive for as long as possible, maximizing their pain and ensuring they experienced every moment of their slow, agonizing death. This was not just about punishment. It was about making a statement of power, dominance, and retribution. The Vikings were known for their resilience and warrior spirit, and they admired those who could endure suffering without showing weakness. It is believed that if a victim could remain silent or avoid screaming throughout the blood eagle, they might be considered honorable even in death. This idea reflects the Viking belief that pain and endurance were tests of a person's strength. The sagas often glorified warriors who faced death bravely, and even in this horrific execution, the victim's ability to withstand agony could define their legacy. To ensure the victim lived as long as possible, the executioners likely took their time with each step. The initial cuts to the back would be precise, avoiding vital organs that could lead to immediate death. The breaking of the ribs, while incredibly painful, was done methodically so that the victim would not die from shock too quickly. Some accounts even suggest that in certain cases, the executioner might pause between steps, allowing the victim to remain conscious for a longer period before proceeding to the next phase. The final stage, pulling the lungs through the back, was usually the fatal blow, as the victim would eventually die from suffocation, blood loss, or organ failure. However, by that point, they had already endured a level of suffering that was beyond comprehension. The sheer brutality of this execution ensured that anyone who witnessed it would never forget it, and those who heard about it would live in fear of ever crossing the Vikings. By prolonging the suffering of their enemies, Viking leaders sent a chilling message. Betrayal and defiance would not only be punished, but punished in the most horrifying way imaginable. Whether the blood eagle was carried out exactly as described or became an exaggerated legend over time, its purpose was clear: to instill terror and maintain absolute control through the use of fear and pain. The blood eagle was not just an execution method. It was a brutal spectacle that held deep significance in Viking culture. It was a form of punishment so severe that it was reserved for only the most hated enemies, particularly those who had committed betrayal or dishonored Viking leaders. However, beyond serving as a horrifying method of retribution, the blood eagle was also viewed as a test of endurance, both for the victim and for those witnessing the act. In Viking society, strength, courage, and endurance were among the most valued traits. Warriors were expected to face hardship, pain, and even death without fear. It was believed that those who could withstand extreme suffering without screaming or begging for mercy demonstrated true honor, even if they were the ones being executed. If a victim endured the blood eagle with dignity, some Vikings might have respected them, even in their death. On the other hand, if the victim wailed in agony and showed weakness, they would be forever remembered as cowards. The concept of enduring pain with bravery was deeply embedded in Viking beliefs. According to Norse mythology, warriors who died valiantly in battle were chosen by the Valkyries and taken to Valhalla, Odin's great hall, where they would feast and fight for eternity. Even in execution, there was an element of this warrior mindset. If a person could endure the unimaginable torment of the blood eagle, perhaps they, too, could be seen as warriors, even if they had been enemies of the Vikings. Furthermore, the execution was meant to demonstrate the absolute power of the Viking rulers. The act of performing the blood eagle in public ensured that everyone witnessing it would be reminded of the consequences of betrayal. It wasn't just about killing a person, it was about making an example of them. The sight of a victim undergoing such excruciating pain, their back flayed open and their ribs spread apart like wings, would have left an unforgettable mark on those watching. The execution served as a lesson. The Vikings were ruthless, and anyone who crossed them would meet a fate worse than death. Whether the blood eagle was entirely real or exaggerated over time, its significance remains clear. It was not only a method of punishment, but also a ritualistic demonstration of Viking values. Strength and endurance were everything, and even in their final moments, those subjected to the blood eagle had one last opportunity to prove their worth. if only by how they endured the suffering inflicted upon them. The blood eagle is one of the most infamous execution methods associated with the Vikings. Yet historians and scholars continue to debate whether it was ever actually practiced or if it was merely a gruesome legend that grew over time. The primary sources describing the blood eagle come from sagas and medieval texts, many of which were written centuries after the events they describe. This raises questions about their accuracy and whether they were influenced by exaggeration, political motives, or a desire to create dramatic and terrifying stories about Viking brutality. One of the main arguments against the blood eagle being a real practice is the lack of concrete archaeological evidence. While Viking burial sites and battle remains have provided insight into their warfare and rituals, no confirmed cases of a victim having undergone the blood eagle have been found. If such a distinctive execution method had been widely used, it is likely that some skeletal remains would show clear evidence of ribcages being broken open from the back. However, no such remains have been definitively linked to the blood eagle, making some historians skeptical about its authenticity. Another factor fueling the debate is the way the blood eagle is described in historical texts. The earliest accounts appear in Norse sagas, such as the Orkneyinga saga and the Saga of the Sons of Ragnar, but these were written by Christian monks and historians long after the Viking Age had ended. Some scholars argue that these authors may have exaggerated or even fabricated the blood eagle as a way to depict the Vikings as savage and barbaric. During the medieval period, Christian writers often portrayed pagan societies as cruel and bloodthirsty, and the blood eagle could have been a product of this biased storytelling rather than an actual Viking practice. Additionally, linguistic analysis of the sagas suggests that descriptions of the blood eagle may have been misinterpreted or mistranslated over time. Some phrases that seem to describe the act of carving open a person's back might have originally been poetic or symbolic rather than literal. The imagery of an eagle being carved onto a victim's body could have been a metaphor for a warrior's soul being sent to Odin, rather than an actual execution method. This has led some scholars to propose that the blood eagle was more of a literary device than a real historical practice. Despite these doubts, others believe that the blood eagle could have been a rare but genuine form of execution. The Vikings were known for their harsh and brutal punishments, and there is no question that they used fear and intimidation to control their enemies. Some argue that while the full, detailed description of the blood eagle may have been exaggerated, the Vikings could have performed some variation of it, perhaps cutting open a traitor's back and leaving them to die slowly, even if the act of pulling out the lungs was impractical or impossible. Ultimately, the truth about the blood eagle remains uncertain. It may have been a real, horrific form of execution carried out on rare occasions, or it may have been a legend designed to enhance the fearsome reputation of the Vikings. Regardless of its authenticity, the blood eagle continues to capture the imagination, serving as one of the most terrifying symbols of Viking cruelty and justice. Much of what we know about the blood eagle comes from medieval texts, particularly Norse sagas and historical chronicles written long after the Viking Age had ended. These sources describe the blood eagle in vivid and terrifying detail, yet their reliability is widely debated. Since many of these accounts were penned by Christian writers who viewed the pagan Vikings as savage and godless, there is a strong possibility that the descriptions were exaggerated or even entirely fabricated to paint the Norse warriors in a more brutal light. One of the earliest mentions of the blood eagle comes from skaldic poetry, a form of Old Norse poetic storytelling used to glorify Viking heroes and their deeds. Poetry in Viking culture was not always meant to be taken literally. It was often symbolic, filled with metaphors and grand imagery. In some accounts, the blood eagle is described in such a poetic way that it may not have been an actual execution method, but rather a metaphor for a gruesome battlefield death or a warrior's soul being sent to Odin. The Orkneyinga saga, written in the 12th century, is another source that describes the blood eagle, though its reliability is questionable. The saga tells the story of Viking rulers in the Orkney Islands and includes various dramatic and violent episodes, some of which seem more like legend than history. The blood eagle appears in this text as a form of punishment inflicted on defeated enemies, but the details vary from one account to another, further suggesting that the saga's authors may have taken creative liberties. Another well-known reference to the blood eagle appears in the saga of the Sons of Ragnar, which tells the legendary tale of Ragnar Lothbrok and his revenge-seeking sons. According to this saga, King Aella of Northumbria was subjected to the blood eagle as punishment for killing Ragnar. However, this story was written centuries after the supposed event, making it difficult to separate fact from fiction. Some historians argue that the tale was likely exaggerated to emphasize the legendary status of Ragnar's sons and to depict their vengeance as particularly gruesome and just. Christian chroniclers, such as the medieval historian Snorri Sturluson, also contributed to the written record of Viking culture. However, many of these Christian texts were written with a clear bias against the Vikings, portraying them as barbaric heathens in need of salvation. It is possible that the blood eagle was either greatly exaggerated or completely invented by these writers as part of an effort to demonize the Norse people. Given that these texts were often written for European rulers who had suffered Viking raids, the depiction of Vikings as cruel and merciless would have served political and religious purposes. Adding to the uncertainty is the fact that no physical or archaeological evidence of the blood eagle has ever been found. While Viking burial sites and battle remains have provided valuable insights into their warfare and rituals, there are no confirmed cases of human remains displaying the type of damage described in blood eagle accounts. This lack of physical proof further suggests that the execution method may have been more of a myth than a historical reality. Despite these doubts, the blood eagle has endured as one of the most infamous Viking legends, largely because of the dramatic storytelling found in medieval texts. Whether or not it was ever actually performed, the way it has been described and passed down through history highlights the power of poetic storytelling in shaping perceptions of the Viking Age. The sagas and chronicles, filled with tales of warriors, betrayals, and brutal punishments, continue to influence how we view the Norse people. Blurring the lines between historical fact and legendary fiction, the blood eagle, whether a historical fact or an exaggerated legend, has become one of the most infamous symbols of Viking cruelty, striking fear and fascination into the hearts of those who hear about it. The very idea of such a horrifying execution method, one designed not just to kill, but to prolong suffering and make an example out of the victim, has ensured that the blood eagle remains deeply embedded in popular culture. It serves as a testament to how the Vikings are often perceived, ruthless, fearless, and utterly merciless when it came to dealing with their enemies. Regardless of its historical accuracy, the blood eagle has played a crucial role in shaping the modern image of the Vikings. Many people today associate the Norse warriors with brutality, conquest, and a fierce code of honor. The idea that they would perform such a gruesome ritual execution only reinforces this perception, making them seem more fearsome than ever. This perception has been strengthened over the years by literature, films, and television series that depict Viking raids and battles with dramatic flair, often showcasing the blood eagle as the ultimate form of vengeance. Popular media has taken the legend of the blood eagle and made it even more terrifying. Shows like Vikings have vividly recreated the execution on screen, emphasizing the agonizing details and making it appear as though it was a widely practiced Viking tradition. Similarly, novels, video games, and historical fiction often reference the blood eagle as a way to portray the Vikings as warriors who ruled through fear and dominance. This ongoing portrayal has helped keep the legend alive, ensuring that it remains one of the most well-known aspects of Viking history, regardless of whether it actually happened. The blood eagle also symbolizes something deeper than just Viking brutality. It represents the Viking belief in strength, honor, and the importance of making a lasting impact. The sagas and legends suggest that even in death, a warrior's endurance was a final test of their worth. If the blood eagle was ever performed, it was not just about punishing an enemy. It was a statement of power, a demonstration that betrayal and opposition to Viking rulers would result in the most excruciating and humiliating fate imaginable. Even beyond Viking culture, the legend of the blood eagle reflects a broader human fascination with extreme punishments and the ways in which fear has been used as a tool of control throughout history. From ancient Rome's crucifixions to medieval Europe's executions by burning, many civilizations have employed terrifying methods of capital punishment to maintain authority. The blood eagle, whether real or not, fits within this pattern, a gruesome yet powerful symbol of dominance, meant to leave a lasting impression on both its victims and those who witnessed it. As historical research continues, scholars may never fully determine whether the blood eagle was truly practiced or simply a dramatic exaggeration. However, its place in history is undeniable. It remains one of the most shocking and memorable tales from the Viking Age, a reminder of how legends can shape our understanding of the past and how the fearsome reputation of the Vikings continues to captivate the world. Whether the blood eagle was a real execution method or an exaggerated legend, its impact on history and popular culture is undeniable. The sheer horror of the practice, the chilling symbolism behind it, and its association with Viking justice have made it one of the most infamous forms of execution ever recorded. It embodies both the fearsome brutality of the Vikings and the deep cultural significance they placed on strength, honor, and vengeance. Even today, the blood eagle continues to be a subject of fascination, appearing in books, films, and historical discussions as a symbol of the Vikings' ruthless reputation. While historians may continue to debate its authenticity, one thing remains certain: the legend of the blood eagle has endured for centuries, ensuring that the Vikings will always be remembered as some of history's most formidable and feared warriors.